Stand by, stand by. Stand by, stand by, stand by. Ready for air in 3, 2, 1. Stand by, ready to go. College football program tonight. And we begin 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Time to kick off another football frenzy with Dave in the City on Locks of the Week Radio.
Coast to coast, internet sports talk, Locks of the Week.
Doc Rivers continues to time and time again not get it when it comes to getting... Oh! Let him play!
How Connecticut are you? Are you wearing khakis and a polo?
Regarding Lynch, who cares? What was he going to do today? Was he going to address each reporter? Oh, thank you for the question.
Cap ran through the entire Yankee lineup, but he left out one guy, and his name is Alex Rodriguez.
I like to try and forget about him because.
From Los Angeles, this is Dave in the City, brought to you by Locks of the Week Radio. Now, here's Dave Medina.
With our friends John and Ron. John in Connecticut, Ron in New Jersey. We've been doing this for almost 5 years. This is our 5th year doing the college football preview. So let's get it started. We have a lot to talk about tonight. We will cover all the conferences, give you our conference previews, and give you our college football playoff predictions. It's all here in these next 2 hours. Our friend Kevin on the cable will join us next week for our usual program. And he's looking forward to this too. He's really excited to hear from the experts. So let's introduce our panel one by one. We start with John. John, once again, breaking it all down as Ron will be doing. John, welcome to the program. How's it going tonight?
Doing great, Dave. For a second there, I didn't know what you were getting at with the opening. It was just kind of like a mishmash of, I don't know, what was, you had some sound issues, but then I was like, oh, okay, he's got some college fight songs going, so all was good. It was a good intro. So really glad to be here, very excited for the season, and plenty to discuss, so looking forward to this. One of my favorite shows of the year.
I love it. I was excited to put together a little montage there. So let's go to Ron. And Ron, welcome to the show. Welcome to our latest college football preview. How's it going tonight, Ron?
Hey, fellas, I'm doing good. I'm very excited to be on tonight. Definitely probably my favorite show of the year. And I think you did a great job with that opening, Dave. I wanted to get up and tackle somebody, punch somebody in the face.
I was pumped too. I was getting into it. This is good. This really just gets you in the mood, doesn't it? I mean, it's just going to be a great year. in college football. I mean, a lot to talk about, a lot of juice, and I think we have some storylines to discuss. But so we'll get into them now. Let's not waste any more time. And there are many storylines that we can talk about as we start the 2015 campaign. But I will highlight some of the key storylines. And John, Ron, you can add anything to the end of this. We start with the Jim Harbaugh era. He leaves the San Francisco 49ers and goes back to Michigan, where he had his career as a player. Obviously, a lot of buzz about the entire situation. And a very exciting moment for not just Michigan, but for the Big Ten. I mean, the Big Ten is starting to look pretty good. So this is where we begin. That's our first of the big storylines this year for 2015. I just want to get your guys' feel for it. I mean, do you think this is going to be a big boost to both Michigan and the conference? And how long do you think it will take for them to really become a big powerhouse? We'll start with John. Your thoughts about the Jim Harbaugh era starting in Ann Arbor.
He definitely adds something to the college game. I mean, he's certainly a personality. I mean, I think he's almost certifiably insane, but almost in a good way. He's just a crazy guy. He just definitely adds to the college football world. It's going to take him a couple of years, Dave. I mean, we'll probably go through our predictions after in the Big Ten, but I'd be surprised if they even made a bowl game this year. If they're like 5-7 or 6-6 again. I mean, he's pretty much working with Brady Hoke's players, and that's going to be tough. But I definitely think give him 3 or 4 years, he'll build a championship team as he proved at Stanford, and that's going to be one heck of a rivalry once he gets that going. Jim Harbaugh and Urban Meyer matching wits every year in the Big Ten, and then add Michigan State, who's always a contender. I mean, you've got a pretty strong conference there, so definitely a boost for the Big Ten to get Harbaugh in there, and if he's going to do what we all think he's going to do and build up that program in a couple of years.
Oh, no doubt. I think it's not going to, and you're right, it's not going to happen in 2015. I felt the same way. I thought, I hope people have very careful expectations for the Michigan program this year, because you can't do it overnight. I mean, there's so many issues with that team right now. We'll get into that in the preview. So, Ron, your thoughts about the Jim Harbaugh era. How much of a boost do you think it is for both the program and for the conference?
Oh, I think it's huge for both, and I mean, for us as college football fans, I think the atmosphere at Michigan is, one of the funnest to watch when they're doing good, especially the rivalry with Ohio State, and I think he's a perfect fit for college. I think he wore out his welcome in the NFL, and I think the turnaround might be faster than we think, just because of the level of teams in that conference. Outside of Ohio State and Michigan State, it's very subpar. I mean, look at Rutgers, made a bowl game last year. So I think it'll be a few years before they become elite again, but I think he could get them to a bowl relatively quickly.
Oh, an interesting take, Ron. I do think that the teams at the top, though, are pretty exceptional. And again, we'll get into that in the conference preview, so we will see. And speaking of exceptional teams, that's our next storyline. Ohio State, the first consensus favorite to win the championship, in my view, since Alabama was the top dog back about 4 years ago. They won the championship last year, and they're returning at least 15 starters. That's what I got. I got 15 returning starters on both sides of the ball. Cardale Jones blossomed into a playoff hero. He and Braxton Miller, he and JT Barrett are going to compete for that quarterback job, and Braxton Miller will transition to a playmaker position. We'll talk a little bit more about Ohio State, but the idea here is that Ohio State really is going to be the team to beat. I think that's going to be set pretty early, and the schedule appears to make it such that they probably will stay that way for a while unless something, some kind of injury happens. So, John, let's go back to you for a moment on Ohio State. This seems to me like the most decisive favorite in terms of winning a national championship that I can think of in quite some time, because it's not only a team that won the championship, but most of that team's coming back too. What do you think about Ohio State's chances? Do you see them as the team to beat throughout the year?
Yeah, you got to make them the favorite for a number of reasons. I mean, you said it first. Just think about it. Last year, they were literally down to their third-string quarterback, who hadn't played at all and he comes in and he wins. Not only they shut out Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game, and they win the college football playoff with their third quarterback. And this was after Miller goes down in the preseason. J.T. Barrett has an amazing season. So I mean, it's just crazy how last year played out. It just shows you how well Urban Meyer recruits. It's a machine, and they're loaded again this year. They're certainly the favorite. We'll see who wins the quarterback battle. I think J.T. Barrett's going to win it, but we'll see what happens. Cardale Jones definitely has a personality, though. If you've seen like some of the stuff he's been doing like on Twitter and everything else, so he's an interesting guy. But I think JT will win the competition, but that remains to be seen. And I think you just have to make them the favorite as well because of their schedule. I mean, let's be honest here. We mentioned Michigan, but the Big Ten, there's only two legitimate teams, in my opinion, in the Big Ten, and it's Ohio State and Michigan State. The rest of their schedule is pretty much a joke. The road games at Virginia Tech could be a little tricky. First game of the season, we all know Va Tech beat them last year, but I think that's the reason why they won't overlook them this year. Urban Meyer will use that as motivation. They will have some guys suspended for that game, but I think they'll pull through. And the rest of their schedule is just a joke. They play Hawaii, Northern Illinois, Western Michigan in the non-conference. And their Big Ten road games are Indiana, Rutgers, and we know that's going to be pandemonium in Piscataway for that game. Illinois and then Michigan for the last road game. That's always one of the huge rivalries. So that could be their toughest road game, but they have all their big, most challenging games at home in the conference. So I'd be very surprised, to be honest, if they even lost a game with their schedule. And then we'll see where we stand at the end of the year with the playoff. But kind of like, we were last year. You kind of said, just pencil in Florida State right now, and they ended up getting there a few more close calls than we thought. But I can say the same thing this year with Ohio State. Just give them the spot in the college football playoff right now. Even with one loss, I just think they kind of proved that last year, it'll go from year to year, that they'll get a spot. So definitely the overwhelming favorite, and they'll be in the playoff for sure.
Yeah, I don't want to jump too far ahead with a playoff preview, but let's face it, I agree with you. I mean, I think this is the team to beat. It really would take some injuries for them to really do anything that keeps them out of the playoff. And as it was, Florida State last year, even with the loss and even with the struggles they had, they made it to the playoffs. So that's always interesting to note. Ron, your thoughts about Ohio State as the consensus favorite to win the championship? Do you feel like they will be top dog all year?
Oh yeah, I mean that's got to be the way you think, because they kind of remind me of like the late '80s Miami teams, or even the Florida State teams or the Florida teams under Urban Meyer. Strange as it seems that they have everybody coming back, and it's like their depth chart is just all 4 or 5 star All-Americans. It's crazy, and I think I mentioned this on the board a week or so ago, but it almost seems like last year was meant to be a prelude to this year, meaning, they weren't supposed to win it last year, but they just got, and as funny as it seems that when Barrett went down and they got Cardale Jones, they got hot at the right time, and he was the right guy for the job at that time, almost like it was destiny. And they got on a roll and won the whole thing. And I think they were really Urban Meyer was setting themselves up for this year to make the championship run, and they just did it a year earlier. I mean, you look at their roster up and down. I mean, they have every big name player coming back. They have 3 or 4 guys who could win the Heisman. So I think you have to make them the favorite.
Yeah, I think that's certainly how it's going to play out the first month, and I expect it to stay that way as well. That was Ron in New Jersey. You just heard from John in Connecticut. I'm Dave Medina, and we are previewing the 2015 college football football this season here in the city on Locks of the Week Radio and YouTube.com if you want to join us there for the video portion of this program. We hope you're enjoying it. You can tweet us at Ditkow if you have any questions or recommendations or salvos, anything you want to give to us tonight. And if you're wondering how that's spelled, it's on the corner of your screen on YouTube, so you can check that out. Next up in storylines for 2015, more coaching changes. But this time, I think the theme is coordinators. Coordinators in very, very established, well-run, successful programs trying to get their next shot as head coaches in other schools. And to give you some examples, you have Pat Narduzzi from Michigan State. He was the defensive coordinator. He will go to Pitt. You have Will Muschamp, who we know. Actually, this is the reverse. He was a coach for Florida and got kicked around because he just couldn't. His teams could not score. But now he goes to Auburn as a defensive coordinator. And then Tom Herman, the man who engineered the great offense for Ohio State last year, including Ezekiel Elliott's incredible 200-plus yard performances late in the season, will be moving to Houston. So there are a lot of good coaching changes to speak of. Georgia's offensive coordinator is moving on as well. So let's talk about those. And we'll actually go to Ron to start this one. Your thought about the coaching changes in college football. Which ones do you think could have the best impact?
Well, I think the one that he actually didn't mention is the Clemson offensive coordinator, Chad Morris. He got hired at SMU. And I think he's a perfect fit there. Runs the wide open spread offense, sort of, joining the legacy of June Jones and the run and gun SMU offenses that we've seen in the past. I think he's the perfect hire there. Like you said, I think Narduzzi fits Pitt well. Bobo, who got hired at Colorado State, seems to be following in the path of SEC guys going out there to make a name for themselves. So I think there was a lot of good hires. Actually, another interesting one was the guy who got hired at UNLV was, what's his name? Sanchez, I think is his name. He's a high school coach who coached Bishop Gorman, which is the number one football high school out west. And they gave him a shot, hoping that they get some of his recruits from his high school. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because you don't hear a lot of that in college football, where they actually take somebody from, a big-time high school and give them a job right away at a D1 school. So it'll be interesting to see how he fares in his first year.
That's going to be quite a leap, and when we get to our Mountain West preview, you'll see what I mean. There is some pretty good competition in that division, and I don't know if UNLV's in the West Division or the Mountain Division. But I think they are in the West Division. And if they are, they are going to be in for serious competition. They got Boise, Utah State, and Colorado State are all going to be pretty much in the mix all year. So that's an interesting storyline. Thanks for pointing that out, Ron. All right, so let's go to John for the same question. Your thoughts about the coaching changes, coordinators making the next leap, and then in one case, a high school coach making a huge leap to D1 school, or FBS school, I think is what we call it now. But anyway, your thoughts about the coaches, new coaches.
One scenario that you guys didn't mention was probably the most interesting one of all. Nebraska fires Bo Pelini after going 9-3 every year. Now, granted, he's a huge asshole, and who can stand the guy? But when you win 9 games every year, you figure you could at least keep your job. And they hire Mike Riley from Oregon State, who, granted, he did a nice job turning that program around. They were just horrible for years, and he got them to respectability. But I mean, what's his ceiling? I mean, is he going to do any better than 9-3 every year? I mean, is 9-3 being a nice guy better than 9-3 being an asshole? I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll find out, what kind of leash he gets. But I thought that was fascinating, and we'll see what happens there. And when he leaves Oregon State, it kind of set off a chain of events where the coach from Wisconsin, Gary Anderson, leaves to take the job at Oregon State. And if I'm Oregon State, I think I upgraded there with Anderson coming in and taking over for Riley, who's kind of gone stale over the last couple of years. And we all know Gary Anderson from his Utah State days, those of us who like to follow the Mountain West. He was going to do some good things at Wisconsin, too, but apparently, Barry Alvarez was really cheap with hiring assistants or whatever for him, so he left for Oregon State, and I think he'll turn things around there. And as a result of him leaving Wisconsin, Paul Chryst leaves Pitt and goes back to Wisconsin, where he was an offensive coordinator for years under Brett Bielema. And let's be honest, I don't think Chryst is a very good coach. I mean, he was 6-6 at Pitt like every single year. And he had some pretty good talent, and they were just a really boring, uninspired team in my opinion. And we'll see how he works out at Wisconsin, but I don't think that's going to be a good move for them. The one interesting hire in the SEC was Jim McElwain going to Florida, which I like. He did a great job at Colorado State, so I think I got to give him a couple of years, though. I mean, they just have no offensive talent down there at Florida, but I think once he gets things going, he'll do pretty well. And a lot of coordinators changing positions in the SEC. The guy from the longtime coordinator at LSU, John Chavis, goes to Texas A&M. Of course, Auburn hires Will Muschamp, who was just fired at Florida. So lots of interesting things going on with the coaching scenarios. And I will say, Ron mentioned it about SMU. I think the AAC, my AAC, did very well this year in the coaching hires, Tom Herman and Chad Morris. So lots of offense, at least for me to watch this year, as UConn gets beat by 40 points every week.
I like that too. The Tom Herman pick is going to be nice for Houston. Houston's already, like you mentioned, they're already pretty good at offense. Now you get one of the best offensive coordinators in the country involved as a head coach now. That could be a really interesting season for Houston. They should be favored to win at least a division in the American, so we'll see how that goes. Ron, any final thoughts about the coaching changes? Because John highlighted a few extra ones. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think John did a great job. I agree with him. That whole Nebraska fallout was fascinating, and Pelini went, actually. I thought Pelini, his best route would have been to go to a school like LSU or somewhere like that and become an assistant for a year or so and build up his resume and look for another head coaching job at the D1 level. But he decided to go to Youngstown State, which is a Division II powerhouse, or FCS, whatever the heck it's called. But I think he's got such a massive ego that he wouldn't have gone to another school to be a coordinator. And good luck in Youngstown State. I mean, the guy, John's right, he's an asshole. I mean, there's no other way you can go around it. So,
yep.
Good riddance to him.
Concur to that. I think that's a consensus by all of us. All right, so as in addition to the coaching changes, many quarterback changes. A lot of new quarterbacks are making their debut across college football. In fact, it's so much. There's so much uncertainty at quarterback on a lot of teams, and I cite the SEC in particular. There's just a lot of questions. Georgia has yet to figure out who's going to start. UCLA is still trying to debate who's going to start. And I tried to look up information yesterday to see if there was an update on that. There really wasn't. They're still kicking it around, like between Rosen and Neuheisel. Could be either of them. Oregon, they have a fifth year transfer. Vernon Adams taking over for Marcus Mariota, who was a rock, obviously. And in Alabama, Jacob Coker will start. He is new. One guy I think that could be interesting, Malik Zaire, Notre Dame. Apparently, I'm told he's pretty good, and he's at least he'll do better with the turnovers than Everett Golson. But that's not saying much, because Golson was just a horrendous turnover machine. So a lot of quarterback change throughout the country. How would you even evaluate the Heisman Award, or do you even give it to a quarterback this year? Because there's Nick Chubb in the wings, the running back for Georgia, and maybe even Ezekiel Elliott might be in play. Let's talk about the quarterback situation. John, I'll give it to you. So much uncertainty throughout college football. Can there emerge someone to be on the same level as what we saw with Winston and Mariota?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There's a lot of uncertainty, and we'll probably get to that more when we talk about the SEC. But, I mean, if we're talking quarterbacks, I think the guy you got to look at first is Trevon Boykin from TCU. I mean, the season that he had last year, and with all his offensive weapons returning, and now that they're probably going to be, I saw the coaches poll. I think they were number 2 or 3. There's certainly going to be that in the AP poll. So I think he's the guy that you have to look at in terms of Heisman quarterbacks, returning. And, a lot of people are pumping up Dak Prescott from Mississippi State as well. I mean, he's an okay player, but I'm not going to go as far as to say the Heisman. So maybe one of these other guys, the freshmen come out of nowhere. We saw Johnny Manziel win the Heisman, I think, as a freshman. So certainly not out of the question. I do like Vernon Adams from Oregon, too. I think if I don't really follow FCS football, but if you are a college football fan, you know the name Vernon Adams. I think he had an unbelievable game. I think it was against Washington last year. They had like 6 or 7 touchdowns. I mean, their offense is just unbelievable for an FCS school at Eastern Washington, and he's going to be a perfect fit for that system. So definitely he's someone to look out for. in terms of maybe a Heisman sleeper.
You know, it's an interesting thought, point on Vernon Adams, because whatever he does this year, he's not going to be around very long, as far as I know. I mean, he's a fifth year. Is it possible for him to stay more than 1 year?
No, it's just a one year thing. I think he's a grad student. You can like play 4 years, and then you can transfer for an extra year of eligibility as a graduate student. So a lot of guys take advantage of it. I don't know what the hell he's studying. I mean, but he gets to play another year of football. So good for him.
Yeah, good for him. I agree. So that'll be a nice bridge then for Oregon as they try to recruit the next big thing at quarterback. Very well done, John. Thanks for that. Now to Ron, your thoughts about the quarterback situation. Again, but John pointed out a great one, Trevon Boykin on TCU. And now you have a pretty veteran team, so he might be the most stable choice at quarterbacks, most stable quarterback situation of all of them. Let's talk about quarterbacks. What do you make of these new emerging quarterbacks, freshman quarterbacks, transferring quarterbacks? You have Golson actually going to Florida State, who you will start there. So, what do you make of all the new quarterbacks in the NCAA?
Yeah, you know, the interesting thing about Vernon Adams is actually, I think, because of the rules where he's a graduate transfer or whatever, he actually had to wait until his he actually got his diploma or something like that. And I don't think he even joined the Oregon football team yet, or if he did, it was this week or the week before. He had to wait until he had his diploma in August or something like that. So that's the only thing that scares me about him is he's got 3 or 4 weeks to try to catch up with the offense, but he hasn't found to do it. So you never know. But as far as the other quarterbacks, it's true. It's this year. It seems like there's so many schools at the top of the rankings that have uncertainty at the quarterback position, and you know it's no surprise that the teams at the tippy top are the ones who are returning starters, like Trevon Boykin and Michigan State with Connor Cook, and I think and USC with Kessler. Mm-hmm. I think a sleeper too for the Heisman is Baylor's quarterback Seth Russell, because I mean you know Baylor's system, they churn out quarterbacks like nobody's business, and I know he got some playing time last year. I think he had like 6 touchdowns, no interceptions, 600 yards when he played. So he's another guy with the talent there. You know, if they get on a run like they did last year, he'd definitely be a dark horse, in my opinion, for the Heisman.
That's a great call. That's an interesting thought. That's an interesting call. I mean, I don't know if I'd say bold, because you know, you're right. Baylor's a really good offensive team and has been for many years, and so you can always expect points over there. And so, you know, definitely want to keep an eye on. I'm going to add one more to the quarterback situation in the column of stable quarterback situation. That would be Anu Solomon for the University of Arizona, and I think that's going to be great for Arizona because their defensive front seven looks pretty good, and having somebody steady at quarterback will certainly keep the ball moving. So I think that's huge. He had some great moments last year. I don't know if I'd necessarily put him as a Heisman candidate, but at least for Arizona, that's one less thing to worry about. So it'll be fun to look at that team as well. Speaking of Heisman, let's talk about the Heisman favorites. A lot of choices this year. Again, it might be pretty wide open, but I would say that Nick Chubb looks really good as far as the replacement for Todd Gurley. He's already shown ability to be productive, and so he could be just as good, maybe even better. And then you wonder who's going to win. Whoever comes out of Ohio State and keeps the quarterback reins probably will be a favorite for the Heisman. We mentioned Boykin. We mentioned Elliott. One other choice that could be a dark horse, Leonard Fournette, running back for LSU. There's just a lot of choices for Heisman. Let's sort it out. John, who do you have as your Heisman favorites this year?
I mean, I think we mentioned them. You know, Boykin, Elliott, those guys are right up there. I lost my train of thought there. We pretty much covered all the main guys.
Okay.
I like Russell. I think definitely he can put up huge numbers in that offense. I'll actually give you a sleeper to not necessarily win the award, because guys from this conference would never win, but maybe he'll get like a couple pity votes. The quarterback from Western Kentucky, Brandon Doughty, I mean, their offense is unbelievable. Like, he could throw like 60 touchdowns this year. The problem is the team as a whole, the defense is just so shitty. I mean, they're probably the most entertaining team in the country. If you watched that Bahamas Bowl, it was on Christmas Eve last year.
I remember this game, yeah.
They blew like a 49-14 lead in the fourth quarter, and the other team had a Hail Mary at the end of the game. It was just epic. But, they're going to be in all sorts of games like that this year. So I guess he's kind of a sleeper like the Team Tato of Marshall was last year to maybe get some, there's always like a small conference guy that gets some votes but doesn't make it to New York. He could definitely be that guy this year.
I hope so. I mean, I'd love to see that from the MAC conference because those games. I remember the day that, and I believe this happened, that Western Kentucky played Marshall. I was looking forward to that all the way, and it didn't disappoint. It was just such a great offensive showcase. So I look forward to him having another great season. All right, so now to the other storylines, if there are. No, I think I got to get to Ron first about the Heisman favorites. Any favorites you wanted to highlight, Ron?
Well, I think you guys pretty much cover them all. I think there's definitely good running backs this year with Elliott, Chubb, and Fournette. Fournette's I think my favorite player in college to watch now. I mean, he's a beast. It's just, it sucks for him that he's got Les Miles as his coach and absolutely no quarterback to throw in front of him. So, I mean, teams stacked the line and he's still running over people. So It'll be interesting to see, if they actually do get an offense, how he grows as a player. But I guess two dark horses too that we don't usually think about the ACC when it comes to Heisman, but if Deshaun Watson, the quarterback from Clemson, is healthy this year and they actually win the conference, it's going to be on his back. So if he can stay healthy, I think he's got an outside shot. And on the same hand, if Georgia Tech does what they did last year and makes a run at the ACC championship and even a college football playoff spot, it's going to be on the quarterback Justin Thomas, his back, and he put up huge numbers last year rushing. So I think those two guys are worthy to keep an eye on if either team makes a run at the college football playoff.
Boy, that's a great. Those are some great choices for dark horse. Justin Thomas and Georgia Tech were exciting in their own way. I mean, they certainly are known for the option, or the triple option, and it's worked to great success. And they won their New Year's Eve game, which pretty convincingly, as a matter of fact. I think that was against Mississippi State. So with that segue, we go into, was that Mississippi State, Ron? I'm just checking.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
He
killed Mississippi State. Yeah.
Killed them. Absolutely destroyed them. Anyway. To the ACC now. We begin our conference previews this year for 2015's college football season, and we'll do these in alphabetical order this year. That means we start with the ACC. So in the ACC, Florida State is going to really take a lot of losses. They are losing a bunch of their guys. Of course, we know that Jameis Winston's out, so he's off to the NFL. That was no surprise to anybody. The defense may be thin. They've been doing this for the last couple of years, but I think this year is going to finally hurt them. They lost a bunch of guys to the NFL, so I'm not sure how much of a favorite they would be. Clemson's going to be interesting. We already talked about Chad Morris leaving for SMU. There'll be questions on offense and defense, but as Ron highlighted, Deshaun Watson, if she's healthy, things will turn around certainly on that side of the ball. Pitt with Pat Narduzzi. Again, a good identity, a good coach for a defensive-style program. Georgia Tech we talked about. And then Louisville and NC State. And NC State had a little juice there against Florida State last year. Miami, Virginia are the two teams where I think you're wondering, when are they going to finally turn it around, or are they going to finally turn it around? You talk about two guys in the hot seat. They would be Al Golden and Mike London. So let's get to the ACC now. We'll start with Ron. Let's preview the conference. How do you see it? Who would be the favorites?
I think, I know a lot of people still like Florida State, but I actually like Clemson and Georgia Tech to lead the conference. I just think Florida State has had too many turnovers in their defensive personnel, like you said, a lot of the guys they lost to graduation or the NFL last year. The way they played last year, even with a Heisman a Heisman quarterback from the previous year and the number 1 pick in the NFL draft, I mean, they were just lollygagging through games, just playing down to opponents, almost disappointing every single game. So I really fell off the Florida State bandwagon last year. I don't see them, even with Everett Golson, bouncing back as a national contender this year. I think if Clemson stays healthy, if Deshaun Watson stays healthy, they have 2 of the most exciting players in the country in Deshaun Watson and Mackenzie Alexander, the cornerback. If they stay healthy, I think they're the team to beat. I think Georgia Tech is right there. I mean, they ran over teams at the end of the year last year, almost made it to the college football playoff. I think those are the 2 top teams. I think the rest of the league is really mediocre. And I think you made a great point about Miami. If they don't improve this year, I don't see any way you can keep Al Golden on as coach. I was reading something the other day that said they had 9 players drafted in the NFL draft last year, and I think the first 5 rounds. And they're a team that went 6-6. And I know they had injuries, but I mean that's you can't cover that up, year after year. Golden just isn't getting the job done there.
No, he really isn't. I think a lot of people expected more from Miami these last 3 years, and I certainly am certainly among them. So they got to do something serious this year if he's going to stay where he wants to stay over in Miami. All right, John. What do you make? Who do you like in the ACC?
I'm going to start off by agreeing with Ron here. Clemson in the Atlantic and Georgia Tech in the Coastal. I definitely think Florida State lost way too much. I have to agree. And then there's this whole scenario now with their running back, Dalvin Cook, who was probably one of their best players towards the end of the year last year, and I don't even know if he's going to be playing. Like, he has some sort of troubles with the law or whatnot. And Winston, for whatever he was, I mean, he was a turnover machine last year, but he really pulled games out of the fire for them. And if they're going to play that lackadaisical kind of football again, it's not going to work. And I don't know. I just seen they lost a lot of talent, and I know Jimbo Fisher recruits well, but I just see Clemson overtaking them this year. Granted, Deshaun Watson, like Ron said, has to stay healthy. He missed some time last year, and their offense it was like going from Francesa to K in terms of quality. Full Scout was just horrible, but so I like Clemson in the Atlantic and Georgia Tech in the Coastal. Some other teams in the conference. I think NC State could surprise this year. They had a decent year last year. I think this is their second or third year with their new coach. Came over from Northern Illinois. Jacoby Brissett is their quarterback, former Florida transfer, and they had a decent season, and I think they could sneak up and get third in that Atlantic division, in the middle of the pack, but I think they could have a decent season. Really not much else to mention in this conference, pretty mediocre, like Ron said. I think Virginia Tech has an excellent defense, like always, but their offense is just going to be hideous once again. They're probably the biggest challenger to Georgia Tech, though. And the horrible teams in this conference, if you want to gouge your eyes out, watch when Syracuse and Wake Forest get together. I think 10 points in the team, that is just going to be an eyesore. That is just brutal. Syracuse and Wake Forest. So there you go. That's kind of the ACC for you.
All right, thanks very much, fellas. Now to the American Conference, the AAC, now up to 12 teams. Navy is the newest addition, which means the independent pool is not much now. We'll get to the independents at the very end of this program. And Navy's fun. Navy's fun to follow because they also employ a very similar offense to Georgia Tech, and they've had their moments. So that's a pretty nice pickup for the American. Houston and Cincy are favorites. ECU, I don't know. I mean, they looked pretty good for like 6 games, and then the next 6 games, it was bad. They were just tanking. So we get all of that, and then Chad Morris goes to SMU. John highlighted that at the beginning of the program. And they've got a ways to go. They were 1-11 in 2014, but a lot of potential there at Southern Methodist. So now to John, since he's very close to the conference, let's get your preview of the American Athletic Conference.
Yes, I am quite close to the league. As you mentioned, SMU 1-11. Of course, the one came against my beloved UConn Huskies. Let me just get them out of the way. Bob Diaco, he's just freaking insane. Did you guys hear about what he did this offseason? He literally created a fake rivalry out of nowhere. Like one day he just comes out with I'm serious, Dave. He comes out with a trophy that he just made up in his office. Like, listen, this is going to be a rivalry now, us and UCF, and we're going to call it the civil conflict. I mean, like, wow, seriously, go out and players and stop worrying about making up a trophy. Honestly, I can't wait till we go down there and George O'Leary is going to run up the score, and UConn's going to lose that game like 58-0. And I hope he takes the trophy, like breaks it on the sideline or something. It's just so embarrassing. He's crazy. I mean, I have hope that he can carry around this year. You know, last year was just him trying to figure things out as a head coach, but I'm not optimistic. But he's just nuts. But in any event, the AAC, it's really between four teams here. Cincinnati, Temple, Memphis, and Houston, in my opinion, are the favorites. I'm not a huge Cincinnati fan. I know they probably have the best player in the league with Gunnar Kiel. I'm just not a fan of Tommy Tuberville. I don't know why. It just doesn't do anything for me. He had that horrible bowl game last year against Va Tech. It just rubs me the wrong way. Obviously, I had some hypothetical things going on with that one, but they're probably the favorite in the East. Don't sleep on Temple, though. Matt Rule's done a really nice job there. Their quarterback, P.J. Walker, is a really talented player. And they played Penn State week 1 at home. I give Temple a great shot in that game. He's really been building that program. In the West, obviously, we mentioned it before, with Houston, Tom Herman coming over. They had the bowl season last year was just unbelievable. Houston had that crazy comeback against Pitt. They scored like 3 touchdowns in like the last 5 minutes to win the game. That was just wild. So between them and Memphis last year, they pretty much returned everyone from a 10-2 season. Their quarterback, Paxton Lynch, is a pretty good player. And I think their coach, Fuente, he was an assistant at TCU for a long time. If Memphis has another good year, he'll be off to bigger and better things. The rest of the league is pretty mediocre. Navy is a good addition, but I think athletically, week to week, I mean, for all the good things that Navy did, their schedule is still pretty watered down. I mean, they'd be playing a lot of Eastern Michigans and those kind of teams. I think week to week in the AAC, they're not going to be as good. They'll still get to a bowl game, but I don't think they're a conference contender. So, gun to my head, I'll take Houston over Cincinnati in the inaugural AAC title game. But I definitely give Memphis a shot as well.
Good point on that. They are going to host their first title game now that they have 12 teams. They'll have their inaugural conference championship. So a very interesting point. And so that also means that this is the first time you get divisions in the AAC. So now let's go to Ron for his preview of the American Conference.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with every single point that John made. I mean, Cincinnati definitely has the most talent, but I'm not a Tuberville fan either. He's a vanilla, plain guy masking himself as this, six-gun, high-flying offense. He just doesn't back it up. He doesn't have the backbone or the balls to back it up. But they definitely have the most talent. Houston is going to be fun to watch. Love watching them put up huge numbers with that offense. And I think in the end it's going to come down to Cincinnati and Memphis. And like John said, their coach Fuente, if they do as well as they did last year, I would actually make him the favorite to get the Miami job, assuming that Golden doesn't succeed this year. I think he'd be a perfect fit there. He's definitely going to be one of the hottest coaching candidates. And watch out for that the quarterback Paxton Lynch. He's like 6'7", 6'8". So I think Memphis and Cincinnati. I'll say Memphis over Cincinnati. And as far as the other teams go, there's not much there in that conference. I mean, they are going to have some fun games, and I do think Temple has a chance to, like John said, surprise people. But I think Memphis, Cincinnati, and Houston are going to make the most noise.
All right, good stuff on the AAC, Ron. Let's now go to the Big 12 for a preview of what, once again, is going to be a pretty good conference. And when you talk about the Big 12, you're talking about a team that probably felt a little cheated last year. Neither TCU nor Baylor made the college football playoff, and they were pretty upset about it. Some of them were, I think one or the other. I think it was either Gary Patterson or it was Art Briles or both. Very classy about it, and which was great. But TCU really took it out on the field. Remember that? They were killing Ole Miss in their New Year's Six game, and they were just absolutely eating them up. And it was really, really fun to see that because those guys were livid. They were really owning it on that night. I believe that was at the Superdome. And so TCU's got a real chip on his shoulder to build on, potentially. And they've returned Trayvon Boykin. We mentioned him already in depth in our first at the beginning of the program. There's some new guys on defense, but that's going to be a very good team. And Baylor, once again, even with a new quarterback, should be great because they're deep at receiver. There's much more to say, but I'm going to leave it to you both. Let us go to Ron now for the preview of the Big 12.
Well, yeah, I think there's actually, you can make the case that TCU and Baylor are maybe the second and third best teams in the country. I think that's a very strong case you can make. It stinks that only one of them will probably get into the playoff, but you look at their rosters, TCU returns almost their whole offense, and obviously Gary Patterson's a defensive whiz, so I wouldn't worry about that side of the ball. And on the other side, Baylor returns almost their whole defense, and Art Briles is an offensive mastermind, so and they have Seth Russell who can step in for Bryce Petty, so I wouldn't worry about that for them as well. And I actually think if the TCU Baylor game was played earlier in the year, that whoever lost that game would still have a chance to make it into the college football playoff. But the way it's scheduled is they play the week before the last week of the season, I think. So with the voters and the committee, I don't think there's going to be enough turnaround time to sneak two in unless they play a game like they did last year, which came down to the last second, that huge comeback. But I think they're 1 and 1A in the conference. Oklahoma will be there. They'll have a decent year like they always do. Oklahoma State, I think, is going to be pretty good this year. They'll have a bounce back year. Their quarterback Mason Rudolph. He played well down the stretch last year. I think they're going to surprise some people. And I think the other interesting team to look at is Texas, to see what Charlie Strong can do in his second year there and if they make any improvements. Because I do believe that that is a school that if they don't show any marked improvements in the next year or two, that we'll probably look to ditch Charlie Strong and get a big-name, big-fish coach like Michigan got in Harbaugh. And, obviously the name that everybody whispers out there is Chip Kelly. So that'll be interesting to watch. But, Baylor and TCU, take your pick which one you like better. I guess because the game is at TCU, I like TCU more. But, like I said, I think they're two of the top 3 teams in the country.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with either one. That's gonna be really fun to watch once that goes down. And last year's game was great too. There was a huge comeback in that one, so that'll be just good football, fun football. Texas is a good point on that, Ron, because I just find Texas alumni and fans not to be patient in this spot because they were so used to being really pretty good. I'm not surprised that they would be, but they are. That's just how it is. I don't see why they would be, because I always felt like Mac Brown could have done more in his maybe 20 years that he was there than he did. but nevertheless, they're going to want something big, and they're going to want something big pretty soon. I always feel like I felt the whole time that Charlie Strong had a short leash, which is unfortunate because I think he's a good coach. But let's go to John now, get his preview of the Big 12. I mean, how do you shake it out between TCU, Baylor, and the rest?
Yeah, Ron said it pretty well. 1 and 1A. I mean, take your pick. And I have to agree, since the game is at TCU, I think they'll take it this year. Especially since they returned pretty much everyone on offense. I mean, their offense is just unbelievable. The way, Gary Patterson, that just goes to show you how good of a coach he is and how he can manage a program. I mean, he's an unbelievable defensive mind, but his offenses were going nowhere for years, and he brings over, I'm sorry, I don't know the guy's name, but it was an assistant from Texas Tech or two assistants that run like that air raid offense, and, all of a sudden, they might have the best offense in the country, them and Baylor. It's just really fun to watch, and the whole conference, really. I really enjoy watching the Big 12 games. So I'll have to say TCU as well, even though you really can't go wrong with either. And I think you could almost make an argument that, as we get to the rest of these conferences here, that a lot of these leagues, like the SEC West and the Pac-12 South, there's some really good teams in there, but there's almost too many good teams, and they're going to start knocking each other off. And if Baylor and TCU both go 11-1, I know it happened last year, and they didn't get in, but you can almost make a case this year for maybe both of them getting into the playoff. We'll see what happens. Although I know the system is designed for one team from each conference to make it. But I mean, you have like a lot of two-loss teams, and TCU and Baylor are sitting there at 12-0 and 11-1. I mean, it's going to be hard to ignore them. So it'll be fascinating to see how it plays out. As for the rest of the league, I agree that Oklahoma State could be a sleeper this year. It really came on at the end of the year when they switched to their quarterback, Mason Rudolph. He had the win over Oklahoma and then the bowl game against Washington. Speaking of Oklahoma, Bob Stoops, I don't know. I almost want to make a bold prediction that he's going to get fired or he's going to leave for an NFL job next year. Just how enough is enough with this guy? I mean, seriously. I saw he brought in a new offensive coordinator this year that does that air raid offense. He came over from East Carolina. Well, that's great, but how can you run an air raid when you don't have a quarterback? I mean, I don't even know who their quarterback is. They have one of the best running backs. They have one of the best running backs in the country. The dude set Melvin Gordon set the NCAA rushing record for a single game, and this dude Samaje Perine breaks it a week later. So they obviously have an unbelievable talent at running back, and they're not even going to give him the ball because they're going to go to an air raid offense. Whatever. So in any event, we'll see what happens with them. I can't believe people are still hyping them up. I mean, they're going to win their 7 or 8 games, and that'll be the end of it. And I do think Stoops is not long for there. Maybe it's this year. Every year you think after the season that he's going to leave, but I think it really could be this year. But in any event, that's the Big 12, and we should have a prop bet on how many points Kansas is going to lose their conference games by. Because they are, oh my God, they might be the worst team in college football. I'm dead serious. I think UConn could beat them. And Charlie Weiss screwed them so bad last year because he wanted to do a quick fix, and he brought in 20 or 25 graduate transfers for 1 year, and they all played for 1 year, and now they have nobody left. So
wow.
It's going to be ugly. They might lose every conference game by 30 points. So that'll be something to watch in the Big 12.
Yeah, that won't be pretty. And you called that too a year ago. You were talking about this last year about all the college, all the junior college transfers and the other transfers, and how this is just going to be this could end up really terribly after the fact. And so here we are with Kansas, and probably as bad as they've ever been. So let me ask you you guys this question with the Big 12, because we've seen TCU and Baylor. It really just a terrible job out of the committee, really not getting either of them in there. It was just bad. It was just bad. And I think I maybe even defended it at the time. But my question is this: would the Big 12 be better off just getting another team to get the 12th member of the conference, so they can get a conference championship game to at least smooth out some of these potential issues that could occur with the selection process? Do you think that there should be now a emphasis on getting a 12th team for the Big 12? It's funny it's called the Big 12, but yeah, should they do a 12th team so they can get a conference game going? Ron, your thoughts?
I'm surprised that they haven't, to be honest with you, just because of the money involved in the conference championship game. And I think if you added a team like Houston there, not only does it make the level of play better for us guys who watch every game, but I think it would raise the bar in terms of the play of teams like Texas and even Oklahoma, who are stagnant in their styles. So I think, it would be beneficial. I don't know how much, but I'm just surprised that they haven't done it, simply for the money.
It's funny. The old Big 12 was one of the first conference teams to have a conference championship game. I remember this going back several years. So how'd you find
the
it?
Dr. Pepper Championship.
Yeah,
game,
that's right. Dr. Pepper, that's right. Sometimes it'd be in Kansas City. I remember that. I'm with you. I thought they'd do it by now. If the AAC can do a championship game, I think these guys could find a team somewhere, get it going. I mean, they could have had Navy even if they needed, if they really wanted to. You had a great one with Houston. That's a good choice. But AAC's got them. So, John, let me ask you the same question. Do you think that the Big 12 would be better off just finding that 12th team and starting a conference championship game?
Well, they actually only have 10 teams, so they need to find 2. Houston's a good start. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, they're right there in Texas. I think they were actually part of the old Southwest Conference back in the day when it was Texas and Rice and Arkansas and all those schools. But Houston would be a good start. I actually think they have freaking West Virginia in the conference. They could go anywhere to get a team. I think they should shoot for the moon and try to get like Boise State and BYU. Schools like that. I mean, that would definitely add to the conference. And you just don't want to add someone for the sake of adding someone. I've seen like Cincinnati and Memphis. Those schools are okay, but let's be honest. I mean, they're not Big 12 caliber schools. I mean, if you got Houston and Boise State, I mean, your league is looking pretty good at this point. But it's just funny how really if the championship weekend had not been played last year, you would have had Ohio State would have been out, and either TCU would have been in. So it's definitely hurting them. But I saw that they're going to try to pass a motion or something to have a championship game played, even though that you don't have 12 teams in your conference. So we'll see how that works out. But it's definitely in their interest to add teams. I just don't know if they want to go down that road. So we'll see what happens. Definitely in the next 5 years or so, we'll really see this come to a head as we get more and more seasons of data, so to speak, to see how the playoffs is filled in. And if they get shut out, again this year, I mean, next fall they'll have 12 teams, right away. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
I mean, if they have to, get a couple of FCS schools. If they really need to fill it up, I just say get it done. All right, let's move on now to the Big Ten, and a very high-profile conference, no doubt. Some of the biggest name programs for many years, Ohio State and Michigan, will anchor this conference yet again. But this time it's because Michigan is trying to rebirth itself after hitting some seriously hard times like I could never have conceived. Because the thing about Michigan was that they were always pretty good for most of our lives. Now they're just outright abysmal. Well, no more. Now they have Jim Harbaugh, and he certainly is a good mover and shaker. And he's definitely done some dramatic things with both Stanford and with the San Francisco 49ers in the NFL. So a new attitude for sure with the Michigan Wolverines. Ohio State is the clear favorite for all of college football, but obviously for the Big Ten, that's an easy cinch for them. And the rest of the conference, Michigan State, Nebraska with Mike Riley, and I agree with John. Like that's a big letdown. Let's be fair here. I mean, Riley is just good enough, not really that great. Is the move just to basically make Nebraska not have to deal with as much stuff, as much riffraff with the administration? I don't know. And then we mentioned Chris Wisconsin. That's a downgrade, and we'll see what happens with that West Division. It'll be interesting. So let's go to John first. Big Ten. How do you see it? This is kind of a silly question. Really, the question is, how do you see the West Division? Because we know Ohio State's going to totally win the East.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State, they're going to run through their schedule. I really do like Michigan State, though. I think they're in for a big year. I think Michigan State's only game they're going to lose all season is against Ohio State. I think Michigan State is going to beat everyone else on their schedule, and we'll see. Maybe that will get them in the playoffs if they beat everyone else and lose to Ohio State, and that's their only loss in the season. They actually play Oregon week 2, and I think they'll beat Oregon because Oregon's going to have an unsettled quarterback situation. Even if it is Vernon Adams, like we talked about, it's going to be his second start, and who knows how acclimated he's going to be with the offense. And remember the game last year when Michigan State went up to Oregon and was leading in the third quarter, and they ended up losing the game. But they're just a real tough team. Losing Narduzzi does hurt for their defensive side of the ball, but D'Antonio is a defensive coach too. So, I think they'll be all right. And I really like their team, but it's just unfortunate they play in the same division as Ohio State. In terms of the rest of the conference, the West is tough. I mean, Wisconsin probably has the best talent, but I just don't like Paul Chryst. I don't know what it is about him. I just don't like his style, and maybe he'll find something back at Wisconsin, but they still have Stavy at quarterback. He seems like he's been there for 30 years, but you lose one of the best players in the country in Melvin Gordon. It's going to be hard to compensate for. So we'll see what happens. They play Alabama week 1, which is an interesting game. I actually think Minnesota could be a sleeper in this conference. I love Jerry Kill as a coach. I mean, every year they've gotten better. I know they're a little offensively challenged, and they did lose David Cobb, who was their star player, to the NFL, but they just keep getting better and better every year. And I think this could be their best team yet. I might go on a limb and pick Minnesota to win the West. I'm just not sold on Wisconsin or Nebraska, like you said with Riley. I guess we'll get our yearly shot in here at Kirk Ferentz in Iowa. And how many 7-5 years does this guy got to have for them to finally fire him? I mean, it's ridiculous. His buyout must be $20 million or something. It's crazy. They're going to go 7-5 again, and he'll be back. Well, I'll be saying the same thing next year, and that's about it. Oh, I guess you can turn it over to Ron, but I'm interested to hear how many games does he think Rutgers can win in the conference this year.
All right, Ron, it's all yours.
Well, let me start with that because last year I really lowballed Rutgers, and they surprised me.
Yep.
They
had a
surprised
good year.
me. They played well, and they were in a lot of their games. Well, actually, they didn't really play well. I mean, look at who they beat. I mean, they beat Howard and Tulane. I mean, they beat up on some terrible teams, and they got Michigan on a bad year, but. I actually, and maybe it's because I follow the team a little bit closer than others, but I don't think they're going to be that bad this year. I actually think losing Gary Nova is probably addition by subtraction.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he lost them maybe 2 or 3 games last year, especially the Penn State game. They have a quarterback battle of their own with Chris Laviano and Hayden Redding, who's actually a transfer from LSU. And I think Laviano's going to win it, but they have a lot of guys coming back on defense. I could see them winning, 6, I don't think 7, maybe 6 games and getting into one of the lower bowls. But that speaks to the bigger point about the Big Ten is that once you get outside of Ohio State and Michigan State, and I agree with John, I think Michigan State is in the one of the top 5 teams in the country, and if both of them made the playoffs, with Ohio State being their only loss, I would be fine with that. I think they're 2 great teams, but outside of that, I mean, it's just a bunch of mediocre 6 or 7 win teams. I mean, take your pick. Who else? Who you think could rise above that? Because I couldn't tell you. I like John's pick of Minnesota, and I think I think Wisconsin could win the West. To be honest with you, I'm not sure. But it's almost like outside of the 2, there's probably 5 or 6 teams in there that are going to win 6 or 7 games. Maybe one of them exceeds and win 8. Penn State, is being talked up a lot this year, and I'm sorry to say, for our friend Irving in Queens, but because he loves Hackenberg, but I watched almost every single Penn State game last year, and he really, really disappointed last year. He was stiff. He missed a lot of easy throws. He got killed behind the offensive line. I think he really regressed, so it'll be interesting to see how he plays this year. But I think it'll probably be Ohio State, obviously in the East, and take your pick in the West. I guess I would lean towards Wisconsin, but I could see anybody in there.
Yeah, that's a pretty wide open, as you mentioned. It's probably just there's a lot of filler in there. There's no doubt, and so we'll just see. We will see. I'm not really big on Wisconsin either, and John's right. I mean, they get a lot of easy games in the beginning of the year, but then it always seems to balance out somehow with the Badgers. So I could see any of those teams winning it. I think Nebraska could do it. I'll probably go Nebraska right now, personally, but this is not really for me to make the predictions. Let's go to the next conference, everybody. We are covering the 2015 College Football Preview Show. My name is Dave Medina, and we're joined by Ron in New Jersey and John in Connecticut. And John, we go to Conference USA, which, looking at the name, doesn't sound like much, but it is the home of Western Kentucky and Marshall, who really dazzled us last year. This year, it's going to be a little different because of the two, only Western Kentucky has a returning quarterback, Brandon Doughty, and Cato over at Marshall was having such a good year, he was considered for the Heisman Trophy by some fans of the game. Well, he moves on. He now is a starter in the CFL, and we'll see if Marshall can somehow overcome that. They do get some great breaks in the schedule. Aside from that, Louisiana Tech, you've got Charlotte joining Conference USA, and a bunch of other teams that I don't really have time to talk about except UTEP, La Tech, and Rice, who have been various levels of good in that conference. So there it is, Conference USA. John, let's get your preview of the conference, which features some very, very good offense. John, it's all yours.
Yeah, that's the story of this conference. I mean, if you like, high offenses, and let's be honest, it's not very good football in terms of the talent level. I mean, there's some good players here and there, as we've mentioned, but just as a whole, I mean, the talent level is just very subpar. But they play really high-scoring games, and it's fun to watch, like on a Thursday night if it's La Tech against Western Kentucky. I'd much rather put that on than, if ESPN is showing, Va Tech and Pitt. I mean, I'd rather, do anything than watch that. That's just a horrible game. I'd rather watch the Conference USA. So, yeah, it's some exciting offenses here. It's going to be, I think the huge difference between Western Kentucky and Marshall, and you mentioned it, Dave, is Western Kentucky has Doughty back and Marshall does not have Cato, and there's your difference right there. So I'll go Western Kentucky in the East, and then Louisiana Tech is head and shoulders better than anyone in the West. They had a really good season, actually, last year. I'm quite surprised, honestly, because Skip Holtz flamed out pretty much everywhere he went, and you didn't think it would happen for him at La Tech, but he did a nice job. And their running back is a player to mention. Kenneth Dixon scored like 30 touchdowns last year or something ridiculous like that. I'm going to nickname the Conference USA the FanDuel USA Conference, because you'll be using a lot of their players in FanDuel this year if you'll be partaking in that sort of thing, because points aplenty in this league. And yeah, you mentioned Charlotte, their first year in the FBS. It's going to be a tough road for them, even in the Conference USA. If they win one game, they'll be lucky. But I guess a lot of support down there, so good for them moving up to the big boys. It'll be quite a while before they're even competitive.
Right, and Charlotte actually began their program only 2 years ago. The first season was 2013, so it's not just the fact that they're joining FBS for the first time. They haven't even had a football program for more than 3 years. This is their third year now, so in their short time as an FCS team, they did not have a single win against FBS competition. So I think John is quite right in saying that Charlotte isn't going to win right away, not even close. If they do win, that's going to be great, and we will see. So, the path has been made before. Georgia Southern was an FCS team. They've been promoted to FBS competition and had a pretty good year last year. Same with Appalachian State. I don't want to get ahead of myself. That's coming up in a later preview. But anyway, onward. Ron, let's get your thoughts about Conference USA. What's your prediction?
Yeah, I'm with John. I like Western Kentucky over Louisiana Tech. Western Kentucky is just they're on another planet in terms of talent in the Conference USA. The interesting thing about Louisiana Tech is their quarterback this year is Jeff Driscoll. who we all remember flamed out at Florida. He was supposed to be the next great Florida quarterback, the heir apparent to Tim Tebow, and flamed out dramatically in his time there. But he gets a second shot as a graduate transfer to play for Louisiana Tech. So depending on how he plays, they might be better than they could be. But I think at worst they're gonna win the West Division. And if there's a sleeper somewhere, I would probably say Middle Tennessee State. They had a pretty good year last year. They return a lot of players. But like John said, I mean, it's a fun conference to watch because they don't get a lot of the publicity. But the games are usually competitive, and you always get those one or two guys like Rakeem Cato last year who put up video game numbers and make the games interesting to watch.
No doubt, and a similar conference to Conference USA from that standpoint, the MAC, and everybody knows about MACtion. And in the MAC, the projected favorites are Bowling Green and Toledo, and Bowling Green actually had a pretty fun year, a lot of offense, and all despite losing Matt Johnson, their starting quarterback, for pretty much the whole season. I mean, he was hurt in the opener, and that was that. He was gone. UMass is going to be one to watch. This could be a big building block season for the generally bad UMass, and they could finally finish above 500. We'll see. And then Northern Illinois is probably going to take a big step back. So now let's go to John for the detailed preview of the MAC conference. All right, John, you're all yours.
Yeah, I love the MACtion. I mean, honestly, there's nothing better than popping on, Toledo versus Bowling Green on a Wednesday night in November. I mean, there's nothing else on. And whoever thought of that, I don't know whether it was the MAC commissioner or ESPN or whatever, but just kudos to them because I just love the MACtion. But anyway, for this year, yeah, I mean this conference again, not much defense being played again in the MAC, which kind of makes it so much fun. In the East, you got to make Bowling Green the favorite, but you're right, Dave. They do not play much defense, and I think that's what really could hurt them. But who else here in this division is really going to challenge them? I don't think it's going to be certainly not Penn State, Miami. Buffalo is interesting. They got their coach actually is coming over from Wisconsin Whitewater. He had an unbelievable record. I don't have it in front of me, but he was like 110 and like 7. It's just a crazy record in Division III. But he makes a huge jump, kind of like that high school guy. It's a different playing field now. But I actually agree with you on UMass. We'll give our friend Andy in Seattle's alma mater a shout out here. Yeah, Mark Whipple and his offense. I mean, they were just absolutely horrendous for years. Their first couple of years in Division I. And now he comes in last year. They have a Marshall transfer at quarterback, and I'll get you his name. I think it's Blake Fraunhappel or something like that. I have it right in front of me. Yeah, Blake Fraunhappel. And they just put up unbelievable numbers, and they returned pretty much their whole offense. So I'll give them a shot at beating Bowling Green and actually making it to a bowl game. And it's kind of sad that they're turning their program around, and then the MAC is going to kick them out. I don't know if it's after this year or after 2016. Yeah, because they said, and it kind of makes sense. They said, join the conference for all sports or get the hell out. And you know what? They have the right to do that. And UMass wasn't willing to move their basketball program and their other sports to the MAC, which makes sense. But so it's gonna. I think UMass can make a bowl game this year. But anyway, in the West, it's between Toledo and Northern Illinois. Tough to say. Northern Illinois wins it every year. It just seems like they have a new quarterback every single year that puts up huge numbers. You had, Jordan Lynch, and you had the other guy there. I forget his name. My mind is drawing a blank. But it went from Jordan Lynch to this other guy. Now they have Drew Hare there. They just pump out those quarterbacks like nothing. But I think Toledo actually is a little stronger team this year. So we'll go with we'll go with Bowling Green and Toledo in the MAC championship game, and we'll go with Toledo to win it.
All right, so Toledo projected to win the MAC from according to John in Connecticut. Now let's go to Ron in New Jersey for his predictions on the MAC conference.
Yeah, gotta love the MACtion. Definitely, like John said, a brilliant marketing idea by whoever came up with putting MAC games on Wednesday nights on ESPN. I mean, it's just brilliant. Yeah, Bowling Green to me is the team to beat. I think they're actually a very good team with Matt Johnson back. in the East Division. I think they're going to run away with it. Buffalo, I guess, is a team to watch. They're bringing back their quarterback, Sal Licata. No relation to or Joe Licata. I'm sorry, no relation to Sal. Seems like he's been there for. Honestly, I think we've been talking about him every year that we've had our preview podcast. He's like 35 years old, but he's still a college quarterback. So good for him. And in the West, I think Toledo and Northern Illinois will both be very good. Like John said, Northern Illinois is another school that churns out quarterbacks. Their quarterback Drew Hare is the next generation type of guy. I would say also watch out for Central Michigan. They actually made I think it was the Bahamas Bowl last year where they lost by a point to Western Kentucky in that great game. And their quarterback's coming back. I think he had like 6 or 7 touchdowns in that game too. So watch out for them, and especially, I'm sure we'll be hearing about them on the board because they play that great football institution, the local powerhouse, Monmouth University, the second week of the season. So
gotta watch out for them.
They're going to be one of my They're going to be one of my favorites to watch this year. But I like Bowling Green to win the conference.
I love it, Ron. A great preview. Thank you very much for breaking that all down. Let us now transition from Midwest to East. Midwest to West. The Mountain West, that is. And Boise State, once again, a conference favorite, despite losing their coach and losing their quarterback and losing their running back. They nevertheless have a pretty deep roster and should be in line to win it again. SDSU will win the West Division within the Mountain West. And as I mentioned in the beginning, there's going to be a lot of competition between Boise and Utah State and Colorado State. And as far as Utah State, Chucky Keaton, back from injury, I feel like he's played like 3 games since I started following him like 3 years ago. But if he can stay healthy, big if, he will be probably the most proven quarterback in the conference, unless I'm wrong about that. Many transfer quarterbacks in the Mountain West this year, so let's try to sort it all out. Ron, we'll give it to you first. The Mountain West Conference, let's hear what you have to say about the Mountain West.
Well, I guess Boise State is the favorite like they were last year. They return a lot of their offense. They have a new quarterback. I think they're starting Ryan Finley this year. But it's the system that they produce. It's not really the talent. So as long as the system wins out, I think they're going to be the favorites. It's interesting. I'll probably find myself, the 7th or 8th week of the season rooting against them. Like I did last year, just because I'm kind of tired of the whole Boise State thing. I'd like to see another one of the Mountain West teams break through. I think the second best team is Utah State. And like you said, Chucky Keaton, he was poised to have a breakout year last year. Everybody thought he was going to be, this next big star, this next big offensive producer like Colin Kaepernick was, and he got hurt, a pretty gruesome injury. So that'll be the feel-good story if he could come back and lead Utah State to the title. I think they'll be pretty competitive. Outside of those 2 teams, like you said, San Diego State is going to have a good year this year. I think Colorado State will probably be decent this year. Outside of that, it's pretty mediocre. Outside of those top 4 teams, I would really love to see Utah State or San Diego State beat Boise, but I'll just go with the history and say that Boise probably, at the end of the year, we're probably looking at them in the New Year's Six Bowl. And we'll probably be looking at them getting killed by an SEC or a Pac-10 team, something like that. But I guess I'll take Boise.
All right, so Boise's long reputation as a competitive team should carry them yet again, along with the talent that they have. But I tend to agree. I think it's just the fact that we've seen what we could see with Boise State, so I've kind of tuned them out at this point. Let's go to John in Connecticut for his thoughts on the Mountain West Conference. Let's get a preview. John, that's all yours.
Yeah, by all accounts, I mean, everyone's picking Boise. It's just, they're like a machine out there. I thought they were going to take a huge step back last year. They lose their coach, Peterson, and, Brian Harsin comes in and does a really nice job. And honestly, they played UConn last year, and they came here to Connecticut, and I saw them play week 3. UConn easily could have won that game, and I'm not exaggerating. I mean, it was like a tie game in the fourth quarter before, of course, we fucked it up with 2 horrible plays, but I mean, that's par for the course. But regardless, it was a competitive game in the fourth quarter, and never did I think leaving the stadium that day that team would go on a run like it did and, make it to the Fiesta Bowl and, beat a good Arizona team. So I got to give credit to their coaching staff for the season they had. But, I mean, just they lose Zay Ajayi, who's just a pounding, bruising runner. I mean, just unbelievable for the Mountain West. I mean, he had an unbelievable season. They lose their quarterback. That's like 2 huge parts of their offense that you got to see how they're going to replace these guys. But apparently, it's the next man up with them. But it remains to be seen. And I agree with Ron. I like Utah State. I like Chucky Keaton. I think their coach there does a great job. They always have a solid defense. I'd like to see them overtake Boise State as well, but it's going to be tough. I mean, Boise's always talented, and likely the favorite again to make it out of the group of 6 or 5, or whatever the hell they're calling it now, to get that one spot. Although Western Kentucky, like we mentioned, is in the mix, and there's a couple other teams as well. There's actually one in the Sun Belt that I want to talk about. We'll get to that later. But as far as the rest of the league, the West, I agree. I think San Diego State is the best team. They have a really electric player, Donnell Pumphrey, their running back. He's very good. There's actually some really Mongo coaches in this league. The guy from Nevada, Bill Polian's son, Brian Polian. I swear to God, every time they show him on the sidelines, he's just screaming like an idiot at somebody. It's like, dude, coach the game. I remember the bowl game they played was against Louisiana Lafayette, kind of a favorite team of ours, and I don't even know if they scored like 10 points after averaging like 40-something all year, and they were just so unprepared and sloppy. It was crazy. And then Fresno State, if you want, there's things that are certain in life, and one of them is Fresno State not showing up in a bowl game every single year. With this team. They go like 6-6 or 6-7, and they just get their doors blown off completely in a bowl game.
True.
I mean, it just kind of shows you how good Derek Carr was. I mean, he hasn't really done much in the NFL. He had 1 year, and he was kind of okay, but he pretty much just played that team. I mean, they were just idiots last year, and they still won the West Division and they made a bowl. But I think San Diego State wins it. So I'd like to say Utah State over San Diego State for my prediction for the Mountain West.
All right. Thanks very much, John. And Derek Carr doing okay for himself in Oakland at the moment. Certainly the most optimism they've had at quarterback in quite a while. That doesn't say much about the quarterback position in Oakland, but nevertheless, the Raiders may have at least something going, so we'll see. And out of the big conferences, and these are the top 2, I think it's fair to say that these 2 probably are the ones everyone talks about right now in terms of conference depth, in terms of the juice, the Pac-12 and the SEC. We will begin with the Pac-12 out here where I am. And some are saying USC's the favorite. Some are saying Oregon's the favorite to win the entire conference. It's going to be an interesting conversation because I like USC a lot. It's my team. But they're returning quite a bit of their offense except for Buck Allen. And I think that's fine because Justin Davis, Trey Madden. What's that?
Yeah, the receiver, Aguilar, he got drafted.
Aguilar's gone too, yeah. That's right, Aguilar's gone. But Juju Smith's going to take over. He was great last year as well, so that's a big loss to be sure. Aguilar was definitely a NFL caliber player. He's out. Juju's shown some pretty good spunk, though. I think he'll be all right. And Cody Kessler's back, so that's going to be a pretty good offense this year. The issue is defense, and they lost Leonard Williams, the All-Pro to be, in my opinion. He'll be doing great things in the NFL. But they do keep Adoree Jackson. Generally speaking, the secondary was not good anyway last year. So I just think that the USC is going to be great on the offense, but the defense is going to be a little shaky. We'll see about that. Now, the rest of the conference. Oregon, we already spoke a fair amount about Vernon Davis. And there's a lot of depth in the running back and at wide receiver. And I mentioned Arizona. Don't count them out because I think Anu Solomon coming back, and they've got a good pass rush. And UCLA returns a lot of their team. The only problem is they don't really have a guy that really was a driving force of that offense, which was Brett Hundley. He will now be in the NFL. Stanford will have a returning quarterback. That's Hogan. He'll be back at quarterback, and hopefully he's not nearly as racist as the wrestling namesake, but that's a sort of a side comment. Stanford's defense still pretty good. And Washington, that will be one to keep an eye on, too. Will Chris Peterson be able to take that next step? As you know, he was with Boise State for many years. Oregon State will be an interesting call, too. We've already spoken of that as well, with Anderson coming over from Wisconsin. So there's a lot to talk about in the Pac-12. Let's start with John. Let's get your feel for the Pac-12 conference.
Yeah, I kind of alluded to this before. The Pac-12 South is just really, really deep. I mean, if you don't count Colorado, and even they could be much better this year. I mean, they could win 6 games. It's just these teams are just going to be picking each other off. I mean, you can make a legit case for any of USC, Arizona State, UCLA, Arizona, or Utah for winning the division, and that's really going to hurt them nationally if all these teams have, say, 2 or 3 losses. I mean, you're not going to get as deep as the conference might be. You might not get a team into the playoffs that way, which is kind of unfortunate. Because there is some really good football being played out west. I mean, Dave, you're lucky. I love the late night Pac-12 games. Like, we get it trending. Pac-12 after dark, that kind of thing. The games are crazy. They start like at 10:30 at night, and it's awesome. But in any event, I don't know. This is going to be a tough choice in the South, so I'll save that. But we'll start in the North, and I guess you got to go with Oregon by default here. I think. I'm not sold on Stanford. I mean, I know they play the tough, hard-nosed football. I mean, they have a light running back. I mean, come on. Christian McCaffrey. But be honest here. I hate to get racial about it, but, yeah. Sorry if you're listening, buddy. But, yeah, I mean, and David Shaw, too. I mean, he's always talked about as this next huge NFL coach. He's the most conservative coach I think I've ever seen in my life. Mm-hmm. And they just, I don't know, I'm a fan of his style and how they play. So I definitely think Oregon will win the North again. But I don't think Oregon's a national title contender this year because of the uncertainty that we mentioned earlier with the quarterback position. And I just saw they lost one of their running backs to a major injury. So I do think they'll win the division, but I think they'll lose a couple games. So I don't think they'll make the playoffs. As for the South, again, you could go anywhere with this. Dave, I'd love to pick USC, but as we saw last year, Steve Sarkisian is not exactly the greatest game manager when it comes to games. I mean, let's be honest, he blew at least 2 or 3 games last year, and I could see it happening again. So as talented as they are and as good as they could be, I do think Sarkisian holds them back. I think Arizona is good, but I don't think their defense is good enough, and although their offense is really good, I don't think their defense is good enough. Arizona State is, Todd Graham, again, just like they could have been in the college football playoff last year, except they went up to Oregon State somehow and lost that game. I still don't know how that happened. But they should be in good shape with Berkovici taking over at quarterback. But, again, all these teams are going to pick each other off. So if I had to choose, I'm actually going to go with UCLA.
Wow.
They return the most starters. Yeah, they return the most starters out of all these teams. Jordan Payton at wide receiver, Perkins at running back. They return pretty much their entire team. And if they can, if this freshman, Josh Rosen, is as good as everyone says he is, he'll be able to kind of let those guys carry him early on, in the non-conference play, and then he'll, kind of take over. But I'll go with UCLA. I believe you could check the tape, but I think I picked UCLA last year to make the college football playoff, and they kind of disappointed me a little bit. Obviously, they didn't make it, but they still had a good year, and I think their talent is there, and they just got to break in the new quarterback. But I'll go with UCLA to win the South. So we'll go with Oregon in the North and UCLA in the South for the Pac-12.
I read somewhere, I think this was my friend Andrew Jacobson who had the stat, that UCLA is returning 17 starters this year. That's a giant number because how many starters can you even have? Like 22 at most, if you include the kickers and all that. Maybe that's 24, but it's a lot of starters returning. But so anyway, yeah, that's a great pick actually, and it was very interesting you bring him up because I was talking in emails with other friends about it, with you guys about college football and the Pac-12, and nobody really gave UCLA much play. Everyone was talking up USC, and once I think I saw Phil Steele picked SC to be another sleeper team. I don't know if that's true or not, but.
Yeah, Alabama's my big sleeper this year.
Oh, you gotta love it. You gotta love it. But yeah, not many people talked about UCLA, and I'm like, most of the teams coming back. It's just the quarterback, which is a pretty big position, not coming back. So I was kind of curious about that too. I really think that if you really just talk about the entire roster, UCLA has a lot of that roster returning, and it's a solid roster as well. So I don't remember any really big losses other than Huntley at the position. Maybe Ron can fill me in on some of that, but I did think that UCLA is quite a bit underrated here in this conference. So let's now go to Ron. Let's get your feel for the Pac-12. How do you see it?
Yeah, I actually think, top to bottom, I think Pac-12 is probably the strongest conference in the country this year. Because, really, you can't think of one terrible team. Like John said, even Colorado, which is, the bottom of the barrel, they're not that bad. They're improving. They got some players. They got a wide receiver named Nelson Spruce who had like 1 million catches last year. So they're, top to bottom, it's really hard to pick this conference. I think in the North, Oregon is clearly the favorite. I'm on board with the Stanford hate. I think they're the most overrated team, year after year. They got lucky that they had Andrew Luck for 4 years, but Kevin Hogan is a stiff. He's a stiff. That offense is like watching paint dry. It's brutal. So, and I think actually the bottom of the North is weaker than any of the teams in the South. I think Washington State, Oregon State, are probably all 4 or 5 win teams. I think the team to watch out for, maybe a sleeper, if you could call him that, is Cal with Sonny Dykes.
Interesting.
I think he's finally starting to take control there. They have the kid Jared Goff, who is probably going to be a top 10 pick next year in the NFL draft if he has a season like he can. He puts up huge numbers. He's probably going to put up 4,000 yards and probably 40 touchdowns this year. They just don't have any defense, but they'll still be fun to watch. So I'll take Oregon in the North. In the South, you guys hit the nail on the head. Any of these teams can win it. UCLA returns basically the entire team outside of quarterback.
Yep.
And Rosen is coming in. Arizona has a stacked offense. They probably have the best defensive player, one of the top defensive players in the country in Scooby Wright, but they don't have much outside of him. So they're going to be in the mix. Arizona State, they have the easiest schedule out of all the teams in the Pac-12, in my opinion. I forget what their home games are, but it's pretty. I think UCLA is their toughest. Road games. UCLA is their toughest road game, so they have everything set up for them. But like John said, they have Todd Graham as the coach. So how far can they really go? They shoot themselves in the foot year after year, and so my pick for the South is going to be USC, Dave, and I know they're your team.
It's tough.
They have a tough schedule.
Yep.
But
yeah.
They really do. They play. They go at Notre Dame, which is going to be a tough game. They play at Cal and at Oregon. So those are 3 games that are all going to be pretty tough. But in my opinion, if you look at it, and I know the depth is still a little off on USC, so they have to stay healthy. That's what I'm basing this prediction on. But if you look each position, they have a future NFL star at each position. They have Kessler at quarterback, who's going to be, probably a first or second round pick. Juju Smith, I think, is going to have a breakout year. He was electric the last, 5 or 6 weeks of the season.
Oh yeah.
He was better than Algor. He was dynamic.
I think he had
They have all 5. He was electric, and in every single game down the stretch. He was Kessler's go-to guy. They have every offensive lineman returning. They have two guys, Woods and Simmons, on the defensive line who will probably be, top three round draft picks in the NFL. The cornerback, like you said, Adoree Jackson, is going to be probably a first-round pick after his junior season. And I think the best player maybe on the team is the linebacker/safety, Sua Cravens, who had a monster finish to the season last year, who's if he comes out this year, he's probably going to be a top 10, top 15 pick at least. So they have the talent there. It's just a matter of if Sarkisian can actually stay out of his own way, and if they can survive the schedule. But I like USC and Oregon.
Nice.
With
yeah.
USC winning it.
Well, I think I would love to pick USC to win the South, but me being the superstitious guy that they have every chance at it. As you mentioned, it's a really talented team. But I kind of side with John with Sarkisian, and you too, because I just think he's just so terrible at coaching. The thing with USC is, if they are going to win the South, they're going to do it by absolutely annihilating all their teams, all their competition, because they're not going to do it in close games. They've seen it proven over and over that they can't really make the right calls in close game situations. But there's certainly the chance that they could beat teams by like 15, 20, 30 points as we go along. Even in conference play, I think they could do that. I mean, if they start roughing it up against some of those lower-end northern teams, Ron, as you decided, that would certainly establish a lot there. Very tough games to begin the season. You mentioned Notre Dame already, and we're going to get to them in a bit. That's a very tough team at this point, so we will get to that. Oregon on the road. I saw it on the schedule. I was excited. I thought I'm even going to Eugene to go see that game, because that'll be a fun game, but very, very difficult for USC to win. And just more of that. So I think I will pick USC, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if they lost. Other than that, I think I'd have Arizona taking the South. And then the North, I have got Oregon as well. I think there's enough talent there to carry one more year to at least win the division. But I'm with John, too. I don't think they're going to win I don't think they're going to be a national title contender at all. So we'll see. Okay, so now let us get to the SEC. Before we do that, though, I have a question from Coach, and this is great. This is related to Harbaugh's old team, Stanford, to a degree, and Harbaugh's new team, not Harbaugh's old area, let's say, and Harbaugh's new program, Michigan. The question is from our friend Coach, who's going to have more wins this year, Michigan football or the San Francisco 49ers? So, John, I would like to give you that question first.
Wow. Ooh. Well, I'll give Michigan 6 wins. So, when the Niners win 6 games, I mean, they play the NFC West, so it's 6 division games. That's tough. They play the NFC North, I know that. And I think their AFC division is the AFC North, so, man, that's a really tough schedule. I don't know. You know what? I'm gonna say Michigan will win just by the slimmest of margins. I say the Niners will go 5-11, and Michigan will go 6-6.
All right, that's a great question, isn't it? It definitely feels like a close contest to me too. So, Ron, which team do you think will win more games?
I'm 100% on board with Michigan. I think San Francisco takes a huge step back this year, and I think just by name alone with Harbaugh, and because the lack of competition in the conference, I think they're 6 or 7 wins easily, and I think it's going to be hard for the 49ers to match that. I'll be the same as John. I think San Francisco wins 5 games, 6 games tops. So I'll take Michigan.
All right, sounds great, guys. So let's. I look forward to seeing how that one plays out. And then the next question is, who's going to be the first one to win a game? That's going to be a fun one for me. I don't know. I think Michigan probably wins its first game. Would you guys probably play that out as well?
Well,
Yeah,
I
I'm
know
not sure who Michigan opens the season with.
Yeah, I know Michigan plays at Utah to start the season. They're not winning that game.
Oh, maybe not.
I'm going to give them a loss there. And I know the 49ers play the Vikings on Monday Night Football, the beautiful Chris Berman 10 p.m. special on Monday night. On that. So I don't know. The Niners could win that game. That's like a 3-point game, but definitely the Michigan's not winning their first game. That's for sure.
Wow. Yeah, I agree with that. They are not beating Utah. That is definitely not happening. Good call by you on the schedule. So, well, there's definitely possible that thing could roll into week 2, and then we still have to figure out who wins that first game. So I'll keep an eye on that for you guys. Good times. Thank you very much for the entertaining that discussion. Now let's get to the big conference that everyone talks about. I don't think it's really the best conference right now. I think we would all agree. I think Ron certainly felt that it was the Pac-12. John, would you say the Pac-12 is the best conference in college football, or which one do you think is the best?
Yeah, it's definitely between the Pac-12 and the SEC, and just in terms of pure depth of the conference. I mean, especially the SEC West. I mean, all 7 teams are pretty solid. Same kind of thing in the Pac-12 South. I don't know. It's really close. You really can't go wrong with either one. And just because I don't like the SEC, I'll say the Pac-12 is slightly better.
Ron, I got to share a tweet that John sent to me the other day about the SEC, and he said. But John, I'll give it to you. I'll let you share this with us. It was so funny.
Yeah, it was basically Dave was, just kind of, he was how excited he was for the show or whatever. And I was just like, I could see a scenario where, the SEC West just beats up on each other, and they don't get a team in the playoff. And just, can you imagine if the world would pretty much end if it happened? Like ESPN would have to. The SEC didn't get a team in the playoff. I mean, Dave, when you made the book about Phyllis from Molda or something, like, can you imagine what she'd be doing if the SEC didn't get a team in the playoff? It'd be crazy.
He would.
Let's be fair. The SEC could have a 4-loss team, and they're making the playoffs.
Yeah.
Probably.
If ESPN has anything to say about it, they're making the playoffs.
Wow.
Paul Feynman would jump off a bridge if that happened.
Yeah. It would get pretty nasty over there in the South if they missed out on the playoff. So I just had a great chuckle thinking about that, John. So that was just a fun tweet that you sent there. So let's get your thoughts on the SEC. So clearly a lot of depth and a lot of opportunities for teams to beat each other and keep themselves out of bigger contention. You mentioned the top 3, Auburn, Alabama, and who was the third one? Oh, was it LSU? No, not LSU. Who was the third team I'm thinking of? Bama, Auburn, and was it Arkansas? No, maybe. Well, I'm talking about the West.
Georgia?
Was it LSU? How did I blank out all of a sudden? Well, anyway, let's get to the SEC. And I do think that Auburn's going to be a really big player. And I think that the fact that they got Muschamp for defensive coordinator, it couldn't have come at a better time because Auburn's defense looked awful the last couple of years. Now that he's back, a pretty good defensive whiz, this team might be pretty good, even though they're getting a new quarterback and Reese Mucus leaves, and so we'll see. And Bama's a bit of an experience as well. I am not so sure if they're going to be as great as others think. So we'll see. Georgia probably is the front runner for the East, even though they have a new offensive coordinator. They they don't even know who their quarterback is yet. And that's the theme of their whole conference, a lot of quarterback uncertainty. And it's a lot to talk about. So let's give it to you, John. Let's preview the SEC. There's a lot of teams. I'm sure I missed a few. Arkansas, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Miss State, Florida. There's a lot to talk about. So, John, it's your floor.
Yeah, the theme here is just there's huge uncertainty at quarterback. I mean, like I said before, who's the best quarterback in the SEC out of the, like a known commodity? And, I mean, I guess your answer would be Dak Prescott. I mean, I don't know. I kind of like Kyle Allen from A&M. I thought he had a good second half of the season after he took over for Kenny Hill, who was short-lived. But, yeah, just tons of uncertainty at the quarterback position, which makes it hard to pick. honestly, I don't see why people are picking Alabama. I know it's Saban and he recruits so well, but you lose, Sims, who, granted, he had a pretty good season, and Lane Kiffin did a nice job calling plays. But I mean, I guess Jake Coker, I guess he's finally gonna get his chance now. I mean, he's been there for like 5 years. They lose Amari Cooper. They lose TJ Yeldon. I mean, those guys are going to be hard to replace. I know he recruits well, but I just don't see it with Alabama. Same Auburn, too. I mean, I love Gus Malzahn. I love his offense, and I just think he's a great coach. But, Jeremy Johnson, he had some chances last year, and I know they had that crazy game against Alabama, but he's unproven. It's just right down the line. Ole Miss, kind of, again, an addition by subtraction, losing Bo Wallace, I think. But they could be better. Who knows? And LSU, Fournette's amazing, but again, Les Miles is Les Miles, and they don't have a quarterback. Whoever they're throwing out there, forget it. Arkansas just wants to bludgeon you to death with their running game. I kind of like A&M just because they have a proven quarterback, and like I mentioned earlier when we talked about the coaches, they had a huge addition with their, getting John Chavis from LSU to come over. And Mississippi State, I mean, they were number 1 in the country last year for half the season. And granted, they turned out to be flawed like we all thought they were, but still, when they're picked pretty much last in the division by almost everybody, and they were number 1 in the country at one point last year. So, I mean, you could just go anywhere in the West. The East is a little more clear-cut. I think the 2 favorites are Georgia and Tennessee. Everyone's predicting Tennessee to have a huge breakout season. And I could see it, but I'm a little skeptical just because they have a lot of young players and they haven't done it before. But I definitely think they're going to be up there in contention. But I have to go with Georgia if I'm going to pick. Although again, they'll go 9-3 or 10-2. Mark Richt will lose a couple games that they should win, but I think they'll win the East. Missouri's always up there. They're always underrated, and they always pull through. They always have a good defense. So they'll probably finish second or third in the East. And to go back to the West, I have no clue who to pick here. So if you're going to force me to choose, I do like Gus Malzahn, so I'll go with Auburn. But watch out for Texas A&M. They'd be kind of like my sleeper in the West. So I'll go Georgia and Auburn for the SEC predictions.
And I think those are good predictions. I know it's fairly chalky, but I like when there's uncertainty with the roster. Then you need a tiebreaker. Go with the better coaching, and I think Auburn has probably the best overall coaching staff of anybody in that division because we know how great Gus Malzahn can be in executing offense, and Muschamp is pretty good at executing defense too. So I feel like together that'll end up being a pretty good combination. But they still have to make up some deficiencies in the roster itself. So we'll see. Now, let's go to Ron in New Jersey. You know the SEC well. Let's get your preview for the Southeastern Conference.
Well, I'm going to go checker on a checker with Auburn and Georgia. I agree with everything that he said. That West is, I can't think of another time where an entire conference basically has no returning quarterbacks. It's nuts. I do agree that Alabama is probably going to take a step back, and a step back for Saban and Alabama is maybe 2 or 3 losses. I think they'll still be poised to make a run next year for a national title. I agree with John that Texas A&M is as good a sleeper as you're going to find there, just because they have the talent returning a quarterback. I think LSU probably has the most talent out of any team in that Western Division in terms of starters returning. They have Fournette, who might be the best running back in the country. They have 2 good wide receivers in Duval and Dupree. And they have a stacked defense, but you have Les Miles, we all know he's an idiot, and you have no quarterback. So that drops them a little bit. So I think by default, and for a while when I was thinking about the season, I really loved Ole Miss because they got a couple guys on that team that are going to be first-round draft picks in Laquan Treadwell, Robert Mdici, the defensive lineman. They have a lot of talent returning, but Yeah, I know that Bo Wallace was horrendous, but you still have to put somebody competent in there to to replace him. And
Yep.
I think the leading contender is Chad Kelly, who was thrown off of Clemson, who's Jim Kelly's son. It's like the fifth opportunity he's gotten. Who knows what he's going to be? And they have Hugh Freeze. So,
Yep.
I mean, that's a knock on them.
It is.
So I think by default, I'll take Auburn because, like John said, Malzahn's a offensive genius. Muschamp is a defensive genius, and I think he's more suited for the coordinator role. And at least we saw something from Jeremy Johnson last year. Maybe he's not the next coming of God like ESPN wants you to believe, but at least we've seen that he can run an offense a little bit. So I'll say Auburn over Georgia in the SEC championship. And I don't know if any of the teams in the SEC are good enough to actually be in the discussion for the top 4 teams, but I guarantee you one of them will make it.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really great thought that John had about the SEC missing the playoff altogether, but it's a valid point too, because again, who has a reliable quarterback situation right now? It might be one team out of 12. It's definitely, I think it's Tennessee. I think it's Tennessee with whoever it was that. Would we even say Tennessee has a good quarterback situation, John? What do you think?
Yeah, Josh Dobbs took over, and he's pretty good. That's why they're up there as a contender. But like I said, the team is pretty young.
Yeah.
If I had to rank the quarterbacks or returning in the SEC, you got Kyle Allen from A&M.
Mm-hmm.
You got Dak Prescott from Mississippi State. You got Dobbs from Tennessee. You got Matty Mock from Missouri. We can't forget him, although he's not great, but he's a returning starter. And you got whoever it is at Arkansas, I think Brandon Allen, but they don't even throw the ball; they just run all the game. So that's like 5 guys out of 14 teams that are returning quarterbacks. It's just crazy. I mean,
yeah,
it's really just such an unpredictable league this year.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
You know what?
Go ahead, John.
You know what I wanted to say too. John made the point. A lot of people are picking Tennessee, and I think I'll believe it when I see it. I think they're a little bit overrated, but with that first weekend of the year, everybody's talking the big games that are out there. I think maybe the most interesting game is going to be Tennessee and Bowling Green, because I could see Bowling Green upsetting Tennessee in Knoxville in the first weekend of the season and really set their season on a downward spiral.
Good point, because I mean, Bowling Green with Matt Johnson. Wow. That could throw off Tennessee. I think that's should at least be a good game. So I'm with you on that. John, your thoughts?
And they play Oklahoma the next week, so you never know if they're going to be overlooking them.
Interesting. Oh wait, who does? Tennessee or Bowling Green?
Tennessee plays.
Oh, okay,
Tennessee plays Oklahoma the second week.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and no, just one more time. Is that at Norman or is that at Knoxville?
They play Oklahoma. They play both games at home.
Oh, okay.
Tennessee.
Gotcha.
But I mean, Tennessee is, the past few years they're no home juggernaut. So
very true. Who were they playing last year? I think it was Miami. That game was outrageous. How much bad football there was in that game. I remember that being pretty rough. And that was at Tennessee. So I remember that too. So let's go to John. John, any final thoughts about the SEC, and then we'll cover the best of the rest.
Well, not really. We're talking about week 1 here. Texas A&M and Arizona are playing in Houston, and that's going to be just an awesome game.
Ooh.
Can't wait to watch that one. That'll definitely set the tone for both conferences too. We kind of talked about the SEC versus the Pac-12. Whoever wins that game kind of gets like a leg up on the season, kind of bragging rights in the media, to start the year, kind of puffing their chest with who's the best conference. So you got that game, you got Alabama versus Wisconsin, and then you have Auburn versus Louisville in the Chick-fil-A games. So 3 really good games to start week 1, which is kind of getting the trend now. These teams want to play good competition to kind of get their names out in the polls. And when those voters at the end of the year, they can say, oh well, they try to actually schedule a hard non-conference, unlike Baylor, who's playing Northwestern State Technical High School or whatever for their first 3 games.
Yeah. Definitely. I have way more respect for those who play the tough schedules. And as you know, everybody, there are still 3 teams, only 3 teams in the history of college football have yet to schedule an FCS opponent, which means the division below them. And those 3 teams are USC, UCLA, and Notre Dame, which starts off our Best of the Rest segment. And our apologies to the Sun Belt Conference, but I just did not feel that they deserve their own preview. So we'll just throw them in under Best of the Rest. Notre Dame, by the way, is going to have Malik Zaire at quarterback, and there's a lot of pub about him. There's a lot of promising potential with him. Will Fuller broke out last season. You probably saw a good part of that, Ron. And Kavare Russell returns cornerback. Most of the defense is basically back for Notre Dame, so this should be a pretty good team. Now, for the rest of the college football landscape, there aren't very many independents left. All that's left now is BYU and Army. BYU ought to be pretty good, but they've got a tough schedule. They have games against Nebraska, Boise, UCLA, and Michigan. So I can't even imagine how good that team will finish. Then from the Sun Belt, I can highlight a couple teams: Louisiana and Lafayette, Arkansas State, Appalachian State, and Georgia Southern. And John, you mentioned that there was a team that you really liked as a sleeper from the Sun Belt. Let's take that opportunity, and if you could divulge that for us.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's not much out there in the group of 5 this year for that one spot. So, why not the Sun Belt? So I'll give you Appalachian State. They started off, it was their first year in the FBS last year, and started off not too well. They started off 1-5, but they won their last 6 games, and they were just killing teams by the end of the year. And the Sun Belt's not a great conference, but for a team to just dramatically change their season around after moving up a division, it's crazy how well they finished the season. And they returned 20 starters of 22, which is just nuts. So they have a really good schedule. I mean, every single game on this schedule they can win except for one at Clemson. And God forbid if they somehow won that game, I mean, they'd be in the driver's seat for that group of 5 bid. So keep an eye on Appalachian State in the Sun Belt. They're a team to look out for.
They've really come a long way. Do you remember back in 2007 when Appalachian State, as an FCS team, went out to... Yeah, what a game that was. Remember they upset Michigan and pretty much showed Lloyd Carr the door that year from that win. So amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, that was one of the greatest upsets in college football history. Really, I mean, they were... Michigan was like a top 5 team that year.
90 seconds.
Season, which is it's just crazy. And now, here's Appalachian State in the FBS. So definitely watch out for them this season.
Absolutely. Good times, John. Now let's go to Ron for the preview of these remaining teams, and let's start with Notre Dame. I think this team, once again, they have a pretty good schedule. They're always going to have a good schedule because they schedule a lot of the same good teams every year, like Stanford and USC. They usually schedule them every year. And Michigan, they tend to play them. Although I understand that they can't schedule Michigan every year anymore because of the affiliation and some of the other changes in scheduling. So that's a real bummer for me because that game was always fun, Michigan, Notre Dame. So let's chat a bit about the Fighting Irish. What do you see from them and this season? And also, what do you see from the rest of the independents as we continue our preview? You can also do Sun Belt teams if you want. Ron in New Jersey.
Yeah, well, let me say that Sun Belt is actually one of my favorite conferences to watch. And, I'm right there with John. Appalachian State is definitely going to be good. And I'd also watch out for Georgia Southern lost 3 games last year.
Yep.
They lost by a point to NC State. They lost by 4
points
to
Georgia seconds.
Tech, and they got killed by Navy at the end of the year. But they're returning most of their star players, too. So Georgia Southern, watch out for them. And, I already saw their coach was in the news recently saying that, if they did get to a bowl game within, I forget, 2 10,000 miles of the campus, he said they would fill up that bowl game. So it'll be interesting to see if they actually fulfill the potential and get a bowl game. That would probably be a fun one to watch, with the atmosphere there. So don't sleep on the Sun Belt. They got a bunch of good teams there. And as far as Notre Dame goes, I think they're right up there with the top teams in the country in terms of talent-wise. And I actually think this year the schedule is a little easier than it's been in recent years. They got a couple tough. Actually, the only real tough road game is at Clemson, which obviously is a big one. But they get Georgia Tech at home, they get USC at home, they get Texas at home to start the season. Their schedule is a lot easier than you would think. And as long as they get competent quarterback play in Malik Zaire, I think they have the talent to make a run at the college football playoff. I think at worst they're going to be in one of the New Year's six bowls, but they definitely have the ability to be a standout team this year.
I like it, and I think it's been a steady progress for Notre Dame in the let's say 3 or 4 years since Brian Kelly took over, and they've shown some tangible progress and this one I feel the same way. I feel like this is going to be good, and the biggest reason it's going to be good is because the quarterback position is going to be very reliable compared to past years. I think that alone is going to be helpful. It's just the mere fact that it doesn't turn that. You do not expect as many turnovers as you're used as they had been accustomed to in previous seasons, mostly Golson, but others had been contributing to that too. I think Notre Dame could really make a run here. First of all, they got that game at home against USC. They should honestly have a good leg up on them, especially early in the year. If the game is close, I give a huge edge to Notre Dame because of the coaching. I think their coaching is better. So I like them as well, and a great endorsement on the Sun Belt. So anything further on the remaining independent teams plus the Sun Belt, John in Connecticut?
Well, I think I agree. Notre Dame has a fairly manageable schedule this year. I would kind of be a little bit wary of the hype that they kind of get every year, but I definitely see them in one of those New Year's 6 games. I don't think they're as good as to contend for the playoffs, but we'll see. If they get off to like a 5-0 or 6-0 start, everyone will be going nuts for the Irish. But I think they'll lose a couple games, but they'll definitely be in one of those major bowls. And nothing really else to add. BYU has a tough schedule. I think you mentioned that, but they're kind of wallowing away, honestly, in their independence. The Big 12 should consider adding them. Them and Boise State would be the best position to that conference.
Now, with the conferences all but previewed, let us now make our postseason predictions. We start with the college football playoff spots. There are 4 spots, so let's get your predictions for who will be in the top 4 this year. John, you have the first word on it. Who are your 4 picks? Well, I know we know one of them already. I think all of us are going to pick Ohio State, but who are your 4 picks to make the college football playoff in 2015?
All right, Dave, I thought about this for a while because honestly, this playoff is great. It's so tough this year to find those last couple teams because it's just so competitive all over the country. So I'm going to, obviously, Ohio State, you're going to have them as one of your teams. I'll say TCU for your second team. SEC West winner, whoever that is, because like we said, as much as it would be interesting to see the SEC out of the playoff, we know it's not going to happen. So since I said Auburn before, to win the West, we'll go with Auburn. And then this my 4th team will surprise you, but I'm going to say Michigan State.
Ooh.
I think they're going to run except for losing to Ohio State. And I think that'll be good enough because how strong Ohio State is, that will get them in. And I think the ACC is not strong enough this year. And I think the Pac-12 will kind of devour itself, and that every team will have 2 or 3 losses. So my picks are Ohio State, TCU, Auburn, and Michigan State are my playoff picks for this season.
That's a solid pick, and Michigan State's had a very proven record of not only getting to the New Year's Eve games, but winning those games. They did a great job in the Rose Bowl against Stanford. And so this is a team that's been there before, and they've got a returning quarterback. And Connor Cook can be as steady as they come. This is a great pick. I like it. It is a little bold, though, because, again, we are basically giving Michigan State some pretty good latitude to essentially win out, except for the Ohio State game. So that'll be really fun to check on. And they've got a good shot at it. I think it'll be good. So, Ron, let's get your 4 teams for the college football playoff.
Well, I posted some predictions on the board.
Oh, you did.
Last
That's
week,
right.
And I actually had a change of heart. I was actually going to go with the exact 4 that John just said, but I guess I'll try to be a little different with one of the teams at least, and I'll say Ohio State, TCU, Auburn by default because ESPN will need an SEC team in there, and I put this on the board, and I guess I'll stick with it here. USC is the 4th team, even though in my heart I don't really believe it. I do think, or at least I would like to see either Michigan State or Baylor be that 4th team. If it all plays out like I think it's going to, and they're both going to be 1-loss teams, I'd like to see them get in. But I'll go out on a little limb and say USC is the 4th team.
That's and again, USC's got the talent to get there. I'm not really sold on their defense, but they've got great defensive players to speak of. And Suwake Cravens, I'm glad you mentioned him earlier in the program. That guy definitely did light it up. I forgot to mention him in my preview. So, let me give you my predictions for the top 4. And it's a lot of chalk. It's I have Ohio State too. I have TCU as well. I have Auburn. The one I'm struggling on greatly is that 4th team. So, I felt like it was going to be a Pac-12 team. And I think I was going to go with Arizona, but that doesn't make any sense because, like you said, their defense really isn't that good. You know what? I'm going to go with the more experienced team here. I'm going to go with UCLA. Isn't that strange? But I'm with a freshman quarterback. But you know what? Can be done. I am going to pick UCLA to be the 4th team, even though they have no record whatsoever of making a run this deep into the postseason. Like, they've never come close to being a national championship contender, except back in 1998 with Cade McNown, and they blew that game against Miami in the regular season. Blew that shot. But nevertheless, I feel like this team, because their defense is so good, I think they're going to be the team to represent. So, again, Ohio State, TCU, Auburn, UCLA, your 4 college football playoff teams. So, thoughts, questions, objections?
Sounds good to me, Dave.
Yeah, I like it. UCLA is that unknown.
Mm-hmm.
If Rosen is half as good as what they say he is,
yep,
I could definitely see that happening.
I do, and again, I do feel like it's the team not only with the most experience, but quite a bit of potential, and it's a very fast team too. That's what's going to be really interesting to watch. So I like it. We'll see if it plays out, and it certainly couldn't hurt because again, there's just anybody could win that Pac-12 South. You guys both have made some good points in that. So we'll see. So now to the championship game predictions. Let's get the matchup. Which 2 of those 4 teams will be the championship game, and who do you think, from what you know, will win the 2015 national championship? John, you're first.
All right, well, the 2 teams that were playing the best at the end of last season, we might as well stick with them for this season. So we'll go Ohio State and TCU, and, just to be different, we'll say TCU takes it all.
All right, so TCU for the championship from John in Connecticut. Ron, you have the floor.
I agree 100%. I think it writes itself. It's the revenge game for not getting in last year, and I like TCU to win it all. I think they have destiny on their side this year.
I'll tell you what, I think this is a great choice. I love TCU as well. Their defense certainly can be very good, and they've got a great defensive coach. But with that said, I'm going to go with the name brands. Ohio State, so we all agree on that. but I've got Auburn against them, and I think it's going to be a repeat year for the Buckeyes. Ohio State to win the national championship. All right, just writing it down on paper.
I certainly wouldn't be surprised to see that.
Yeah, this is a really experienced team, and you know, it's just tough to really bet against Urban Meyer, isn't it? I mean, a lot of times when he's in a big game, he wins that game a lot, and that's why I've always found that striking. I'm like, has he lost a game like this? Has he lost a national championship? I mean, I'm sure he's done it, but I mean, just guys, think about this. Like, when was the last time that Urban Meyer lost a national championship game with any team? Can you think of it? When was the last time? I mean, maybe it did happen, but I'm trying to think of when it did. Do you guys remember any off the top of your head?
I think he's undefeated in national title games. He won 2 at Florida, and then he won the one last year. I'm just trying to think of the last big game that he lost, and the first thing that comes to my mind is the Orange Bowl 2 years ago. They lost to Clemson, but other than that, I mean, he pretty much wins almost every big game that he's in.
Very true. Very true.
I can't think of a big game that he's lost.
It's very interesting. It comes to me because I remember that run last year, and I'm like, wow, he's doing it again. I mean, I just think he's really remarkable how well he can coach on the biggest stage. So it's gonna be a fun year, and it was with the two of your help with Mike. I'm sorry, with John and Ron's help that we really set the table for what I think is going to be a really terrific college football season. I want to thank you both for really contributing some great insight and knowledge to this preview. And so I will leave it to either of you for your final thoughts. John, final thoughts as we head into the 2015 season. What are you looking forward to?
Just everything, Dave. I mean, we pretty much covered it all. I mean, there's so many storylines and so many players and teams and coaches to follow, and college football is just an amazing sport. I mean, honestly, we all love sports, but college football it's right there. You know, with certainly one of my favorites, and I can't wait. Certainly, you add in FanDuel in the mix, and you add like all these other stuff, and it's just amazing. So September 3rd cannot get here soon enough. We got a big game that night with TCU and Minnesota, and it'll just carry the stuff all the way to the national championship. So. Can't wait, and hopefully we can come on again. We'll be doing the Kids Club pick, I hope, once again this year, Dave, so we'll get some weekly analysis on these games.
I love it, and I would like to take this opportunity, as a matter of fact, to formally invite the two of you, Ron and John, to the Kids Club picks for 2015. Are you both in on that? Would you guys like to contribute? John's in. He already stated his desire. Ron, would you like to join us for our weekly feature?
Yeah, I'm in.
All right. So, John, it's going to be fantastic. I'm looking forward to that, or re-upping that. I'll ask Andy as well, and we'll see if the Oatman's in on it as well. And it's going to be just too much fun, especially if we get everybody back, like all four of us do it again. That'd be really fun. So I look forward to it. We'll keep track of the scores and everything. Ron, let's get your final words. What are you most looking forward to as we approach 2015 college football?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, by evidenced by the ratings and the money generated for the college football playoffs last year. I mean, it's exciting. It's probably growing as the second biggest sport outside of the NFL. In terms of the popularity in our country, and it's skyrocketing, and it's exciting. And to John's topic, I will be setting up FanDuel every Saturday for the college football scenario. We'll probably do the 4:00 games and on, and if you want to get in on that, Dave, that's an extra incentive to watch. But I think the most surprising thing about tonight is that you didn't get interrupted by a call from Jerry and Piscataway because the Yankees they just lost a 7.5 game lead in under 2 weeks.
Ooh.
And
wow,
and, you don't know that his phone might be broken, but to me that was the most exciting thing about tonight.
Dang, those Blue Jays. How about the Blue Jays lately? After those trades, they look really, really good. Amazing that one pitcher
Break
can
'em up, Dave.
Yeah. They could be... Now, Ron, just gun to your head. Gun to your head. Blue Jays in the postseason, at this point, what do you think? They look good.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
I think they're in.
I think the Yankees' age is catching up to them.
Yep. And I think that if the Blue Jays don't win the division, they'll still make it as a wild card. I just feel like one way or another they're in. And you could see the buzz around Toronto with the stadium now, the way things are going. And they've really started to get their fan base riled up again. It's really awesome. So that's another subject for another day. Ron, thanks for your thoughts. John, thanks for your thoughts. I definitely want to incorporate all of that into our podcast as we continue. So thank you very much for accepting the invite. We will see you then next for the Kids Club picks for 2015. I can't wait. Maybe we'll go write a theme song for it or something. It'll be good. But guys, thanks again. Have a great week and enjoy the football season. It's going to be a great time. So take it easy and thanks once again for your great contributions.
All right, thanks, Wade. Have a good night.
Take it easy, guys.
All right, fellas. That's it for John and Ron, and that's our show. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. Enjoy the great college football season. Much to look forward to, much to watch. I am Dave Medina. Follow us at DitCow for future show updates, past archives, all the good stuff. And our website, www.ditcow.com, to tune into every episode we've done to this point, with some exceptions. But we're trying to upload all the past shows up there. We should have that done by September. So, enjoy the weekend. We'll see you next time.